My name is Samira. I'm 41 years old, and I come from Amman, Jordan. I was born and raised in a traditional Muslim family. Since I was little, I was taught to fear God, to follow the pillars of faith, to prostrate myself in prayer 5 times a day. Every word of the Quran was sacred to me, and for many years, I believed that I already knew all the truth that the Creator wanted to reveal to humanity. But life has mysterious ways of confronting us with the invisible. And in that hospital room, between tubes, machines, and a desperate fight for my life, that's where God chose to show me something I never imagined. Something that no prayer I had ever prayed could prepare me to see. Something that would change not only my faith, but my very soul. When my heart stopped beating, time didn't stop with it. On the contrary, there began the deepest and most supernatural journey anyone can experience. And no, it wasn't a hallucination. It was not a simple neurological experience. I was no longer on Earth, and what I witnessed there was as real as the air I now breathe. Many say there is only one way, and I believed it, until I went beyond the veil, until I was called a name I never imagined hearing in that place. It wasn't a dream. It was a presence, a light so pure, so full of love, that no human words could describe. And at that moment, I understood that God is greater than any doctrine, that His love goes beyond the boundaries of religions, that the true teaching of heaven is love, grace, and truth, revealed not by books, but by Him who is the living Word Himself. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I only ask that you open your heart, because what I'm going to tell you now could change the way you pray. How do you search? How do you understand God's plan for your life? This story is not about religion. It's about a date, a calling, a revelation that did not come through men, but directly from eternity. And maybe, just maybe, you are here today because God wants to talk to you too. Because He still calls. He still reveals it. He still lifts up ordinary people to share extraordinary messages. I'm just a voice, a witness. But what I saw, what I felt, and what I was told in that place of light is something that still pulses within me every day and moves me to pray like never before, searching like never before, loving like never before. And it was at that moment, when my spirit left my body, that it all began. I grew up surrounded by faith. From a young age, I learned that prayer was the way to keep my soul clean, and that every word as spoken before God needed to be done with reverence, fear, and surrender. My mother taught me the verses of the Quran even before I learned to write, and my father told me that paradise was reserved for those who obey without question. Faith was the foundation of our house, and honestly, I never thought about deviating. I never considered another truth, another God, another light. My world was made up of prayers at dawn, fasting during the holy month, respect for elders, and obedience to the scriptures. Every detail of my life revolved around the desire to please God, or at least what I was taught He expected of me. At the age of 13, I proudly put on the hijab for the first time. I felt chosen, different, Santa. It was as if, in that gesture, I was saying to the world, I am God's. I serve Him, and my life is His. But as the years passed, something inside me began to worry. I continued to pray 5 times a day. I still fasted. I still followed the rituals. But there was an empty space inside my heart that no amount of religious repetition could fill. It was as if no matter how much I dedicated myself, God was far away, silent, untouchable. I remember one night when I knelt for hours, crying in silence, with my face pressed against the prayer mat. I asked for answers, not about the world, not about other religions, but about myself, about my purpose, about my soul. Am I really connected to God? Does He see me? Does He hear my voice? Or is this all just tradition? These questions tormented me, but I never had the courage to share them with anyone, because doubting, in that context, was almost a sin. Questioning was seen as spiritual weakness. Still, something inside me wanted more. No more rules, no more obligations, but more presence, more true, more God. I began to realize that my faith had become a routine, not a relationship. The fear of condemnation has always been greater than the desire for communion. I prayed not to be punished, and not because I wanted to be close to God. And it was in this silent crisis that I lived for years. A woman who, on the outside, was seen as pious, honorable, God-fearing, but who, inside, felt alone, insecure, with a soul tired from trying so hard to please a God who always seemed to be too far away. But I didn't talk about it with anyone. I smiled, did my duties, and told myself that doubt was the work of the enemy, that all I needed was to try harder, pray more, fast more, be more rigid, firmer, more devout. And that's what I did, for years, until the day my body couldn't take it anymore. A simple pain turned into a faint. Fainting turned into a race to the hospital, and the hospital became the scene of something that no doctrine or religion could predict. On that cold stretcher, as I listened to the doctors speak words I didn't understand, everything seemed to spin slowly. It was as if time was getting ready to stop. My body was shaking, but what hurt most was God's silence, that silence that accompanied me for so many years. And there, between machines beeping, nurses running, and prayers whispered for my family, my heart stopped. And it was at that moment that the sky opened, but not in the way I expected. What if, right now, you are also looking for something deeper? What if, like me, you followed everything you've been taught and still feel like you're missing something? Have you ever felt like your prayers hit the ceiling and bounce back? Have you ever had the feeling of following the rules but not feeling the real presence of God? Maybe you're closer to the truth than you think. But before I tell you what I saw and who welcomed me on the other side, tell me one thing. If your soul stopped now, where would it go? Perhaps what comes next will answer that question in a way you've never heard it before. That morning, everything seemed normal. I woke up early, as always. I performed my ablutions, spread out the prayer mat, and bowed before God with the same devotion as every day. My lips repeated the words I had recited for decades. But that morning, something felt off, a weight in the chest, a pain that I didn't know where it came from, a deep anguish, as if my soul was telling me something that my body didn't yet understand. I took a deep breath, tried to ignore it. I continued my prayer, but my heart felt like it was screaming. I finished praying with difficulty, went to the bathroom, and there, everything went dark. I just remember feeling a sharp pain pierce my chest like an invisible spear. My legs gave way. My body hit the icy floor, and everything was silent. I was told later that my sister found me passed out, lying next to the sink. Her despair was such that her screams echoed throughout the house. They rushed me to the hospital, and there began what the doctors called the fight for life. But I was no longer there. The medical team said my pulse was weak, the heartbeat was irregular. They tried everything: injections, defibrillator, oxygen. They ran from one side to the other. The machine started to beep. The line on the screen flickered, but increasingly slowly, until it stopped. According to the doctors, my heart stopped for 11 minutes. 11 lifeless minutes. 11 minutes without a beat. 11 minutes that, for them, represented the end. But, for me, it was the beginning of something that has no explanation in science, medicine, or any human theory. And if you think that 11 minutes is nothing, I invite you to rethink that, because what happened to me in that interval was so profound, so real, that it changed the course of my existence. But there, at that exact moment when the doctors declared my body as clinically dead, they had no idea that my consciousness was very much alive. While they fought with syringes, devices, and resuscitation attempts, my soul no longer inhabited that body. I no longer heard the sound in the room. I no longer felt pain. It was as if a veil had been removed from my eyes. But Calm down. I know this may all sound strange, even unbelievable. I thought so too, even Liv. Until that moment, death had always been my greatest fear. The separation, the trial. I was always taught that when the soul leaves the body, it is immediately brought to account, that the angels would ask questions about my faith, my prayers, my fasts, and I firmly believed that. Therefore, my biggest concern has always been to obey. But there, in that moment when my body no longer responded, I realized that nothing I was taught prepared me for what really happens when the soul leaves Earth. And as the doctors tried to bring me back, another reality began to unfold before me. There was no tunnel, there was no trial, but there was something, a different silence, an emptiness that wasn't empty, a peace that was not the absence of sound, but fullness, like I'm being carried somewhere where time doesn't exist, a space outside the world, out of words. I couldn't understand what it was, but I felt that I wasn't alone. If you've ever been through a moment where you thought it was the end, then maybe you understand what I'm trying to say. That feeling that everything that was important no longer makes sense, that nothing more can be done, that control completely slips out of your hands, and it's exactly there, when you think you've reached the end, that God begins to speak. But what he showed me, no one ever told me. Not my family, not my teachers, not my religion. It was something that challenged everything. And even today, when I close my eyes, I can return to that moment when my soul crossed an invisible border and saw what is behind what we call death. Now, I know you might be wondering, what did she see? Where did your soul go? Who was there on the other side? I also asked myself this in the first few seconds. And when the answer came, it wasn't what I expected. It was bigger, stronger, more real than anything I've experienced to date. But before continuing, let me ask you something. Are you really prepared to know what happens when the soul leaves the body? Because sometimes the truth that awaits us is not the one we were taught to believe. When my eyes closed in that hospital, I really thought it was the end. The pain disappeared. The sound of machines, doctors, voices, everything disappeared as if someone had turned off the world. But it wasn't darkness. It wasn't nothing. It was a transition, a crossing. I can't accurately explain the exact moment I left my body, but I felt it. I felt as if a gentle current was pulling me out, as if my soul was freeing itself from a weight it had been carrying for a long time. Suddenly, I was above my own body. Yes, I could see everything. The doctors pressing on my chest, trying to revive me, the rush, the despair in their eyes. And the strangest thing, I felt at peace. There was no pain. There was no fear. It was like I knew everything was happening exactly as it should. My consciousness was full. I was awake, but outside the flesh. Time there didn't move like it did here. It was as if I were in the eternal, in a space between now and then. And then I started to float. It was light, light as the wind, light as a whisper. A golden glow began to envelop me, but it was no ordinary light. It wasn't like the sun or any lamp I've ever seen. It was a living light, a light that seemed to have intelligence, love, consciousness. She filled me. It entered me as if I were made of glass. I felt a love that completely disarmed me, a love that didn't judge, that didn't demand anything, a pure love, an eternal love. I was carried gently by this glow to a place that I can only describe as indescribable. It wasn't heaven like we see in images. It was something much bigger, deeper. The environment had no defined shapes, but everything there vibrated with life. It was as if the universe itself was breathing around me, a peace so intense that it made my tears flow, even without a physical body. And it was in this place, in this heavenly environment, that he appeared. At first, I only saw a presence in the distance, but something inside me knew. My spirit recognized it before my mind even understood it. As the light approached, his form revealed itself. A man, a serene face, full of sweetness, of compassion, the deepest, most loving eyes I have ever seen. There was no judgment in them. There was truth. There was a light that passed through me, as if he saw to the last layer of my soul. And still, he smiled. He didn't need to say who he was. I knew, even though I grew up hearing that he was just a prophet like any other, even though I spent my whole life without recognizing his name with reverence. Even so, my soul bowed there, before him. I knew it was Jesus. He looked at me, a look that took me apart, a look that said, "I have always been with you." But what he said to me, is what changed everything. In a quiet but firm voice, he spoke, "You are not ready, but take this truth with you. I am the way, the truth, and the life." Those words passed through me like a ray of pure light. I had heard this phrase before, in debates, in videos, from Christians, but hearing that directly, from him, with that presence, with that spiritual authority, was as if the universe itself had stopped to show me what had always been before me. He was the truth, not a theory, not a doctrine, but a living presence, a personal love, a light that guides even those who have never sought him. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to stay. There was no pain. There was no doubt. There was no fear. Just love, revelation, and meaning. For the first time in my entire life, I felt complete, as if my soul had returned to its creator. And it was then that, tenderly, he reached out his hand towards me. I didn't touch it, but I felt the touch, a transmission of something that words will never achieve, as if he had planted a truth inside me, a seed, a mission, and everything started to move away. The light went out gently. The presence was still with me, but the peace gave way to a tug, like I'm being sucked back in. I didn't want to. I cried in spirit. I asked to stay, but something told me, "You need to tell." And this is where I ask you, with all the sincerity of my soul, have you ever felt like there is something beyond? Something that no religion has been able to explain to you? What if the truth you seek is not in what you have learned, but in who wants to find you? If you're feeling this inside right now, maybe it's because he's calling you too. I don't know exactly what the return was like. I only remember the pain. Not physical pain, but a violent rupture between two worlds. When I opened my eyes, I was back on the stretcher, the hospital roof, the bright lights, the piercing sounds of appliances, a doctor's voice calling my name. The confusion was so great that it took me a few seconds to understand that I was alive. Again, my throat was dry. My body felt like it had been run over by a train. But what hurt most was inside. A dull, deep pain that squeezed my chest, as if my soul were out of alignment with my body. I started to cry, without knowing why. It was as if something had been ripped away from me, or perhaps given back, because the place I came from was real, and what I saw was true. But this truth scared me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hold on to that presence that had touched me on the other side. I wanted to go back to that love, to that light, but I was stuck here, back to the physical world, back to the life I knew. And then came the shock. How could it be true? How could it be Jesus? That didn't make any sense within my faith structure. I had spent my entire life believing that Jesus was a prophet, just a messenger, a man of God like so many others. I respected him, of course, but I never saw him as the center of anything. And now, after everything I've experienced, everything I've felt, he was the center of everything, the center of light, of peace, of eternity, the center of love itself, and it tore me up inside. I spent the first few days in silence. My sisters came to visit me, held my hand, looked at me with concern. But I couldn't speak. How to explain something like this? How can you tell people who love God, but in a different way, that you died, were received by Jesus and came back with a truth that breaks everything they taught you since you were a child. I felt divided. A part of me wanted to deny it. I wanted to pretend it was just a delusion, a medication-induced dream, a creation of the brain in agony. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't, because everything I felt in that place was more real than any pain I had ever felt in the flesh. I saw, I heard, I was touched, and there's no way to erase that. There's no way to unsee it. I cried every night, and he cried in silence, because the fear of speaking was as great as the desire to scream. I didn't know if anyone would believe it. Or worse, if they believed, what would they do to me? My world has always been rigid, a world of laws, of tradition, of honor and shame. The simple idea of saying that I had seen Jesus could end everything, with my reputation, with my family, with my safety. So I shut up. He wrote on sheets of paper and then tore them up. I prayed quietly, but it wasn't like before. Now my heart turned to him, to the one who told me, I am the way, the truth, and the life. But praying with that name scared me. A fear that was not spiritual, but human. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of being alone. I asked myself all the time, why me? Why would he reveal himself to me? An ordinary woman, a Muslim. Why didn't he appear to someone who already believed? And then one morning, while everyone was sleeping, I sat on the hospital bed, still weak, and whispered, Jesus, is it really the Lord I saw? Show me what to do now. Silence took over the room. But inside me, something started to change. It wasn't an audible response. It was a breath, a heat, a conviction. I wasn't crazy. It wasn't a hallucination. And as much as it was still difficult to accept, I knew that it had been real. But the question that tormented me was, how am I going to live now, with this truth inside me? Because what was revealed to me, I can't keep it. And you? Have you ever experienced something that you couldn't tell anyone? Have you ever felt like you saw or heard something spiritual, but were afraid of being called crazy? Maybe what you saw was real too. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. It took me days to muster up enough courage to tell her what had happened. My body was already improving physically, but my soul still felt out of place. I knew that holding on to that truth was only eating me up inside. Something in me burned with the need to share, to say out loud what I had experienced, what I had seen, and especially who I had met on the other side. I needed to speak, even if it was just once, even if no one believed it. I chose my older sister. We have always been close, confidants. I thought that, out of everyone, she would be the most understanding. I waited for the right moment. We were alone in the room. She was taking care of me, combing my hair, like she did when we were children. And with my voice still weak, I looked into her eyes and said, I need to tell you something that no one else knows. She stopped. He listened to me carefully at the beginning. But as I talked about floating out of body, about light, about peace, and then I mentioned Jesus, her gaze changed. She walked away slowly, as if I had said something unclean, as if I had blasphemed. Her eyes filled with tears, but not from emotion, from fear, scared of what that meant, scared of what I was becoming. She asked me, almost begging, not to repeat this to anyone else, that what I had experienced was an illusion, a spiritual trap, and he said to me, in a firm tone, almost like a warning, if Dad hears this, he may never look at you the same way again. But I needed to tell. I needed to get that out of there. He was stronger than me. So even with a heavy heart, I told my father, and he got up from the chair and left the room. Not a word, just silence, and a look I will never forget, a look of deep disappointment, as if I had dishonored everything he taught me. The next day he returned, but not as a father. He returned as an authority, said I was delusional, that he had lost his reason, who needed urgent spiritual help. And then, without consulting me, he called a sheikh from the community to talk to me. The shake came with good intentions, perhaps, but his words were like stones thrown into an open wound. He spoke about deception, about evil spirits, about the importance of rejecting any voice that contradicted the foundations of faith. He asked me to repeat renunciation phrases with him, but as I listened, everything inside me screamed otherwise, because I knew what I saw, I knew what I felt, and I knew it wasn't just any spirit. It was Jesus. After that, isolation came in waves. Some friends started avoiding me. Messages have decreased. The invitations disappeared. A neighbor who used to come visit me every week started crossing the street so as not to see me. I started to hear whispers, sideways glances, and that terrible feeling that I had become a stranger in my own home, a foreigner, in my own faith. And yet, something inside me remained firm. It was as if that light that touched me was still alive here, inside my chest, a flame that neither rejection nor silence nor contempt could extinguish. I felt alone, yes, but for the first time I felt truly guided. I felt that, despite everything, I was on the right path, not an easy path, but the path of truth. I would sit for hours looking up at the sky, asking, "Lord, what do I do with this now?" And sometimes I felt like the answer wasn't a voice, but a certainty. Keep going. Just keep going. You're not alone. Have you ever been through something that changed everything and no one believed it? Have you ever had to choose between the truth that set you free and the fear of being rejected by the one you love most? Have you ever felt like the whole world moved away from you, but still, a voice inside your heart said, "Don't give up"? Maybe you are living this right now. Maybe this story is touching something that you also have inside. And if that's the case, stay here with me, because what happened after that, it's not over yet. For a long time I remained silent. I carried a secret inside me that seemed to weigh more every day. It was like having seen the sun with your own eyes, and yet living locked in a dark room, afraid that, when you opened the window, the world wouldn't be ready for the light. For months I fought with myself. I prayed in secret. He called for Jesus quietly, when no one heard, and every time I spoke his name, something inside me warmed, as if he responded to me, with love, with presence, with peace. But fear was still a strong enemy, the fear of what people would say, the fear of consequences, the fear of losing everyone who was still by my side, and above all, the fear of not being enough to carry such truth. I constantly asked myself, who am I to talk about him? Who will listen to me? What will they think of me? Until one night, he came to me again. I don't know if it was a dream. I don't know if it was a vision. I just know it was real. Real like the first time. I was lying down, with my heart sinking, between contained tears and unanswered questions, when everything went white around me. A soft, welcoming whiteness. There was no scenery, just presence. And then, there, before me again, was Jesus. The same light, the same look that penetrates without hurting, who sees everything, but loves even more. He didn't say much. He just looked at me, and with that soft voice, but with authority that permeates the spirit, he said, "Don't hide the light. Let it shine." Those words broke me. It was as if he was saying, "You didn't see me to keep. You saw me to tell." I woke up crying, with my heart pounding, my hands sweaty, and the feeling that my soul had been shaken. I knew what I needed to do. I knew I could no longer remain silent. That's when I decided. I decided to open my mouth, tell what I experienced, reveal what I received. And at first it was difficult. The words trembled. The voice broke. But a greater force was pushing me. I started with a friend who listened wide-eyed and just said, "Are you sure you want to say that out loud?" And I said, "Yes, because if I don't say it, I'm going to explode inside." Then I told one more person, and another. Some laughed, some avoided me, but others cried. Others said, "I also saw Jesus." People who I never had the courage to imagine had already gone through something similar began to open their own hearts. Reports emerged from all sides. Simple people, suffering people, people who had dreams, visions, touches, encounters, people who, like me, had also kept everything out of fear. It was as if an invisible network of testimonies began to form. Each story seemed to light the flame of another, and little by little I realized I was no longer alone. My testimony was not a scandal. It was a seed, and when launched with faith, it fell into hearts thirsty for light, for healing, for answers. I worked up the courage to tell a small group. Then I recorded an audio, and finally, a video. I was shaking all over, but when I finished recording, I felt as if a prison had been broken, as if, finally, I had obeyed that soft but insistent call. Let the light shine. And that's when the messages started arriving. People from all corners saying, I saw the same light. Jesus visited me in the hospital too. My soul felt the truth as you spoke. The internet, which for so long was a distant place for me, became a channel of blessing, a place where people who had never met, but who had similar experiences, could meet. The pain became a bridge, fear became a voice, and loneliness became community. And maybe that's why you're here now. Maybe you have a story too. Maybe he experienced something supernatural that he never had the courage to tell about. Maybe you have a vision, a dream, a presence that you still don't know how to explain. But let me ask you very gently, what if what you experienced was not madness, but a calling? What if you are also being invited to let the light shine? I'm not going to lie to you. It's still hard. Even after everything I've experienced, even after having the courage to open my mouth and tell the world what I saw, what I felt, what I received, there are still days when fear hits. There are still days when I wonder if I am strong enough to sustain this mission. Because yes, it is a mission. It wasn't just a beautiful or moving experience. It was a calling. One touch, one send. Jesus didn't tell me to become someone else. He called me by name. He didn't erase my story. He gave it meaning. He didn't rip me out of my past. He showed me that he was already there, all along. Every tear, every lonely prayer, every silent question. He saw, he listened, and he waited for the right moment to reveal himself. Since that supernatural encounter, my life has been a rebirth, a process, a path, not perfect, not easy, but true. Everything I knew as faith was given new meaning. Today, my faith is no longer based on the fear of making mistakes, but on the love I received even before I understood. I was touched by grace, a grace that found me even when I wasn't looking for it, a grace that visited me in a hospital, between life and death, to remind me that I am loved, and that nothing, absolutely nothing, can erase this truth. You may not believe it, you may think it's an exaggeration, or you could be there on the other side, with your heart racing, because something in you recognizes all of this, because maybe you were touched too. Perhaps you have already felt this presence, this light, this calling, and out of fear, he kept it, silenced. He buried it very deep. But if there's one thing I learned on this journey, it's that when the light enters the soul, it no longer accepts living in hiding. It begins to shine even without permission. It begins to overflow in the eyes, in the voice, in the attitudes, and one day, she explodes. Because whoever has seen the sky, whoever has felt the touch of the eternal, can never again be satisfied with a shallow faith, with empty rituals, with obligatory silences. I'm not better than anyone else, but I am witness to something that changed my eternity. And that's why I speak. That's why I tell you, therefore, I continue. Even if they mock, even if they reject it, even if it hurts, because I found the truth, and the truth has a name, and he said to me, take this with you. So, if this video came to you, it was not by chance. Maybe you are here because your soul needed to hear these words. Maybe Jesus is also calling you to come out of the shadows, to leave fear aside, to respond. And I won't ask you to believe me, but I'm going to ask you one thing. Talk to Him. Talk to Jesus. Not with formulas, not with fear. He speaks like someone talking to someone who is really listening, because He is. And if you still have doubts, if your faith has been broken, if your story is full of pain, give in just a little, a whisper, one sentence, a sincere thought. He will listen, because that's what He did to me. He listened to a tired, suffocated, afraid soul and responded with light. Maybe you are struggling with an emptiness that no one understands. Maybe you have questions that no one wanted to hear. Maybe you even experienced something supernatural but were afraid to tell it. And if so, right here in the comments, I also saw the light, not for me, but for other people to see that they are not alone, so that the world knows that He still appears, that He still calls, that He still transforms. You may not have experienced an NDE, but if you've ever felt like there's something more, something beyond, something greater than everything you've been taught, then you've already been touched. And that's just the beginning. The light did not come to be hidden. She came to shine. If this story spoke to you, if it somehow touched your soul, I invite you to subscribe to the channel here. This isn't just a click. It's being part of something bigger. From a community where lives are being touched, where testimonies like this are being revealed, and where the truth continues to be shared with love. If you made it this far, leave a like. It's not just to help the channel. It's so that this message reaches more people who, like you, are also looking for something beyond. People who need to know that Jesus still visits, still speaks, still transforms. The video now appearing on your screen may be exactly what you need to hear today. There's something there that will touch your heart in a way you might not be ready for yet. But if you've made it this far, it's because you're ready to go deeper. Click and stay with me. God still has more to show you.